The king's guards aren't here for games. Show respect or step aside." Merchants were already setting up their stalls, calling out to early customers, and the scent of fresh bread and roasted herbs filled the air. In the midst of this busy morning, a young traveler named Elias arrived at the city gates. His boots were dusty from the long journey, and his cloak was worn, but his eyes shone with curiosity and excitement. He had heard stories of Eldoria's grand palace and the king's guards, and he wanted nothing more than to see them for himself. As Elias passed through the city gates, he noticed the people around him moving with a sense of purpose. There was a tension in the air, a kind of quiet anticipation that made him pause. Some townsfolk whispered hurriedly to each other, glancing at the road that led toward the palace. From the direction of the castle, he could hear the rhythmic clang of metal boots striking stone, armor shifting with every step. Elias' heart raced. He had traveled far and seen many towns, but nothing had prepared him for the sight he was about to witness. The king's guards were marching toward the town square. They moved in perfect unison, their polished armor catching the sunlight and reflecting it in dazzling patterns. Each guard held a spear in one hand and a shield in the other, and their faces were stern and unreadable behind their helmets. Even from a distance, their presence commanded attention and respect. The townspeople stepped aside as the guards approached, bowing their heads in reverence. Children peeked from behind market stalls, and merchants paused their work to watch. Elias, caught up in the excitement, pushed closer to the line of guards. He could see the intricate details of their armor, the carefully maintained swords at their sides, and the way they moved with precision and discipline. Unable to contain his excitement, Elias whispered to himself, "So this is what it feels like to be near the king's guards. They're incredible." He leaned forward, trying to mimic their posture, straightening his back and lifting his chin in what he thought was a respectful stance. But in doing so, he got a little too close. One of the guards, a tall man with a scar running across his cheek, turned his head and fixed Elias with a sharp gaze. Elias froze, suddenly realizing he might have made a mistake. The guard stepped forward, his boots heavy against the stone street. "Sir, step back," he said in a deep, commanding voice. "You are too close. These streets are not for games." Elias laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm sorry, I didn't mean any harm. I wanted to see you up close." The guard's eyes narrowed. "The king's guards serve a serious purpose. We are here to protect the king and the people. Disrespect or foolishness will not be tolerated." Elias nodded quickly, trying to appear contrite, but he couldn't help a small smile as he whispered to himself, "I didn't think it would be such a big deal." As the guards continued marching, Elias followed at a respectful distance, careful not to cross any lines. He watched as they entered the town square, forming a perfect line in front of the palace gates. The leader of the guards, Captain Thorne, stepped forward, his presence even more imposing than the others. His armor was decorated with gold accents, and his eyes, sharp and piercing, scanned the crowd with quiet authority. Captain Thorne raised his hand, and the entire line of guards stopped instantly, their movements perfectly synchronized. The crowd fell silent, and even Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something about the captain that demanded respect, not through fear, but through sheer presence and discipline. Elias looked around at the townspeople. Many of them bowed deeply as the captain passed, while others whispered in admiration. He noticed an elderly woman clutching her shawl, her eyes wide with awe. "The king's guards, they're not just soldiers," she whispered to a child beside her. "They are the shield of our king, and their duty is sacred." The child's eyes mirrored Elias' own wonder. Elias realized then that he had underestimated the weight of their responsibility. These were not men and women who simply wore armor. They carried the safety of the entire kingdom on their shoulders. As the morning wore on, the palace bells rang, signaling the start of the royal procession. Elias, caught in the current of activity, moved closer to the square. He watched as the king's horse-drawn carriage approached, adorned with golden decorations and velvet curtains. The guards flanked the carriage on all sides, their eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. Elias tried to take in every detail. The way the guards held their spears steady, the subtle nods they gave to each other as signals, the disciplined steps they took in perfect rhythm. He was fascinated, but a small part of him felt a growing sense of unease. He realized that any misstep, any careless action could have serious consequences in such a setting. Unable to resist his curiosity, Elias took a cautious step closer to one of the guards. "Excuse me, sir," he said softly. "May I?" The guard turned, his expression stern. "You may not. Stay back. This is not a place for your amusement." Elias froze, feeling the weight of the guard's words. He had been so eager to see everything that he had ignored the rules, and now he understood that respect was not optional here, it was required. He took a step back, lowering his gaze in humility. I understand," he said quietly. The guard nodded once, then returned to his position. Elias watched him, realizing that this simple nod carried more authority than any words could convey. The young traveler felt a mixture of awe and fear, but more than anything, he felt a deep respect for these men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting the king and the kingdom. As the procession moved on and the king's carriage disappeared from view, Elias found a quiet spot near a fountain to sit and reflect. The city was returning to its normal rhythm, but the image of the guards remained vivid in his mind. He thought about the stories he had heard on his journey, tales of bravery, discipline, and loyalty, and now he saw them in living form. Elias realized that his journey to Eldoria had taught him more than he expected. It was not just about seeing the palace or meeting the king. It was about understanding the responsibility and dedication required to serve a higher purpose. He promised himself that he would learn from this experience, that he would carry the lesson of respect and humility wherever he went. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Elias stood up, dusted off his cloak, and began to explore the city with a newfound sense of purpose. He would continue his journey, but now he understood that some things, like the duty of the king's guards, were not for entertainment or amusement. They were sacred, and those who failed to respect them would soon learn the consequences. And so Elias' adventure in Eldoria had begun, not with the thrill of seeing the king's palace or the excitement of a royal procession, but with a quiet, humbling lesson: the importance of respect, discipline, and the weight of responsibility. Even as he walked through the bustling streets, he could still hear the distant echo of boots on stone, the steady rhythm of the king's guards, a reminder that some roles in life are meant to be honored, never taken lightly. Elias had spent the rest of the morning wandering the streets of Eldoria, but he could not get the image of the king's guards out of his mind. Their disciplined movements, the serious looks on their faces, and the respect they commanded from the townspeople left a lasting impression on him. The lesson he had learned earlier weighed on his mind, but curiosity, and admittedly a bit of pride, pushed him forward. He wanted to see more, to understand fully what it meant to serve the king and protect the kingdom. By midday, the town square had emptied slightly. The royal procession had moved on, and most townspeople had returned to their daily routines. Elias found himself near the edge of the square, observing the guards as they performed their duties. Some were inspecting the streets, others were standing at their posts with unwavering focus. Captain Thorne walked among them, giving brief instructions, his presence commanding attention without needing to raise his voice. Unable to resist the temptation, Elias stepped a little closer than he should have. He tried to mimic the stance of the guards again, this time standing taller, his chest out, arms at his sides. He smiled to himself, thinking he might look like he was part of the formation. But as he did, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Startled, he turned to see Captain Thorne himself standing there, towering over him. The captain's piercing eyes studied Elia's, and the young traveler felt a chill run down his spine. "You are learning nothing," Captain Thorne said, his voice calm but firm. "You do not understand the importance of discipline. Stand straight, but not for play. Stand straight for respect, for responsibility." Elias swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Captain. I wanted to see what it's like to be a guard." Captain Thorne's expression softened just a little, but his voice remained strict. "Being a guard is not a game. You do not wear this armor to look impressive. You wear it to protect lives, to uphold order, and to follow the king's commands without question. Do you understand?" "Yes," Elias said quickly. "I think I understand now." Captain Thorne studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "Perhaps you do, perhaps you do not. Only time will tell. But let me make this clear. Foolish behavior near the guards is dangerous. If you wish to remain here, you will show respect. Always." Elias nodded, trying to absorb the weight of the captain's words, but even as he did, his curiosity flared once more. He wanted to see how the guards trained, how they moved so perfectly in unison, and how they managed to remain so focused at all times. Captain Thorne seemed to notice his hesitation. "If it is knowledge you seek, observe, but do not interfere," he said. "You may watch, but remember, your role here is not to amuse yourself." Elias agreed eagerly, and Captain Thorne allowed him to follow at a safe distance as the guards began their training exercises in a large courtyard just outside the town walls. The courtyard was wide and open, with stone tiles worn smooth by years of foot traffic. Wooden dummies were lined up for practice, and there were targets set up for spear throwing. The sound of metal clashing against wood and the thud of boots against stone filled the air as the guards went through their routines. Elias watched in awe. Each guard moved with precision, their actions deliberate and calculated. They were not just strong, they were disciplined, patient, and focused. Captain Thorne demonstrated a series of movements, showing how to deflect attacks, hold a shield, and strike accurately with a sword. One of the younger guards, noticing Elia's wide-eyed fascination, tried to explain some of the techniques. "It's not about strength alone," he said. "It's about timing, control, and understanding your opponent. Every movement must have purpose." Elias nodded, absorbing every word. He realized that what he had thought of as mere display of power was actually years of training, concentration, and sacrifice. Each guard had spent countless hours perfecting their skills, not for applause or admiration, but to fulfill their duty to the king and the kingdom. As the day went on, Elias grew bolder. He tried to mimic some of the movements he had observed, practicing with a wooden sword on his own, but it was harder than he imagined. He struggled to keep balance, his strikes were clumsy, and his timing was off. A few times he nearly collided with a guard who gave him a sharp look that made him flinch. Captain Thorne watched silently from a distance, occasionally stepping in to correct Elia's posture or demonstrate a technique more clearly. "Do not rush," the captain said. "Patience is as important as strength. Discipline comes first, skill comes second." Elias took a deep breath, trying to focus. He realized that his earlier arrogance had been misplaced. He had thought being a guard was impressive because of the armor or the way they marched, but now he saw that it was the discipline, the patience, and the respect for their duty that made them remarkable. By late afternoon, the guards paused for a break. They sat in a neat row, drinking water and wiping sweat from their brows. Elias, exhausted from trying to keep up, sat a little apart, catching his breath. Captain Thorne approached him once more. "You are trying," the captain said, his voice softer than before. "That is good. But remember, effort alone is not enough. You must understand why you do it. The purpose behind every action is what matters." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of the lesson. "I understand, Captain. I want to learn. I want to respect what you do." Captain Thorne studied him carefully, then gave a small, approving nod. Perhaps you can, but words are easy, actions are harder. You will be tested. Elias felt a mixture of excitement and fear. He did not yet know what the test would be, but he understood that his journey with the king's guards was far from over. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Elias reflected on the day's events. He had learned that curiosity, while valuable, could be dangerous if not guided by respect. He had seen firsthand the power of discipline, the importance of patience, and the seriousness of duty. He also realized that his own behavior earlier in the day, his playful attempts to mimic the guards, had been foolish. He felt a quiet determination to do better, to learn not just the movements of the guards, but the principles behind them. The evening air grew cooler, and the city of Eldoria settled into a calm rhythm. Elias walked back through the streets, past the market stalls and homes, replaying the day in his mind. He thought about the words of Captain Thorne, the precise movements of the guards, and the reverence of the townspeople. Everything he had witnessed had left a mark on him, shaping the way he saw honor, respect, and responsibility. As he reached a small inn on the edge of the square, Elias paused to look back toward the courtyard where the guards continued their duties. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and perhaps new tests of his character. But he also knew that he was ready to face them, armed with the understanding that respect was not given lightly, and that foolishness near the king's guards could bring consequences he was only beginning to comprehend. That night, as Elias lay on a simple cot in the inn, he could still hear the distant echo of marching boots in his mind. The rhythm, steady and unwavering, was a reminder that the king's guards were not there for games. They were there to protect, to serve, and to uphold the values of the kingdom. And if he truly wished to learn from them, he would have to earn their respect through humility, patience, and dedication. With that thought, Elias drifted into a deep sleep, dreaming of polished armor, disciplined formations, and the unwavering gaze of Captain Thorne. He knew that his adventure in Eldoria had only just begun, and that the lessons he was about to learn would shape him in ways he could not yet imagine. The next morning, Eldoria awoke to a brisk, clear day. The sun shone brightly, and a gentle breeze moved through the streets, carrying the scent of fresh bread and blooming flowers. Elias woke early, his mind still filled with the lessons from the previous day. He felt both excitement and a sense of nervousness. Today, he thought, would be different. Today, he would show that he had learned from his mistakes. After a simple breakfast at the inn, Elias made his way back toward the palace courtyard. As he approached, he noticed a group of guards already assembled, preparing for another round of training exercises. Captain Thorne was there, standing tall and commanding attention as always. Elias took a deep breath and stepped carefully into the courtyard, keeping a safe distance. The guards moved with precision, performing complex drills with swords, shields, and spears. Each movement was deliberate, each action purposeful. Elias watched closely, trying to absorb every detail. He remembered the captain's words, "Discipline comes first, skill comes second, purpose is what matters." Elias had been careful to follow the rules this time, but his curiosity got the better of him. He inched closer, fascinated by the way a young guard executed a series of defensive maneuvers with flawless timing. Just as he reached the edge of the training area, a loud voice stopped him. "You there," Captain Thorne called, his voice firm and commanding. "Step aside." Elias froze, realizing he had crossed the boundary. He stepped back quickly, bowing slightly in apology. I'm sorry, Captain. I didn't mean to." Captain Thorne walked toward him, his gaze sharp. "Your intentions mean nothing if your actions show carelessness. You are lucky the guards have patience today, but remember, not everyone will be so forgiving." Elias felt a pang of fear mixed with shame. He had thought he was careful, but he had made another mistake. He nodded earnestly. "I understand, Captain. I will be more careful." Captain Thorne's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained watchful. It is not enough to be careful. You must understand the seriousness of being near the king's guards. Today, you will witness something that will teach you why respect is not optional. Elias followed at a distance as Captain Thorne led the guards to a narrow street near the edge of the city. There, a small commotion had drawn the attention of some townspeople. A group of thieves had been spotted attempting to steal from a merchant, and the king's guards had been summoned to intervene. The tension in the air was palpable. Citizens gathered to watch, whispering nervously among themselves. Elias stayed back, his heart pounding. He had never seen the guards in action outside of training before, and he felt a mix of fear and awe. Captain Thorne gave a brief command, and the guards moved as one. Their formation was perfect, their steps silent yet swift. They surrounded the thieves, cutting off any escape. Elias watched as the leader of the thieves drew a dagger, but one of the guards stepped forward, using his shield to block the attack while another disarmed the man with a swift, precise movement. Elias could hardly believe what he was seeing. The guards were not just disciplined, they were incredibly skilled, able to respond to danger in an instant. Every movement was calculated, every action deliberate. The thieves had no chance against such precision. After a few tense moments, the thieves were captured, bound, and led away by the guards. The townspeople cheered softly, but the guards did not smile or celebrate. Their duty had been completed and they moved on, already focused on their next task. Elias felt a deep sense of respect for them. He realized that the king's guards were not heroes because of stories or appearances. They were heroes because of their commitment, their discipline, and their ability to protect others without hesitation. Captain Thorne approached Elias again. "Do you see now?" he asked. "The king's guards are not here for games. Every action we take has consequences. Every mistake can be dangerous. Do you understand the weight of what you have witnessed?" Elias nodded slowly, his eyes wide with understanding. "Yes, Captain, I understand now. They are amazing, but not just because they are strong or skilled. It's because they take their duty seriously. They think before they act and protect people without question." Captain Thorne studied him for a moment. "Good, but understanding is not enough. You will need to remember this lesson when your actions are tested. Curiosity and eagerness are valuable, but they must be guided by respect and caution." Elias felt a surge of determination. He wanted to prove that he could learn, that he could respect the rules and the guards' responsibilities. He followed them back to the courtyard, watching closely and absorbing every detail of their training. Over the next few hours, Elias tried again to practice some of the movements he had observed. He struggled, of course, and made several mistakes. He stumbled, missed a strike, and nearly fell more than once. Each time, Captain Thorne or another guard corrected him with patience but firmness. "You are improving," Captain Thorne said finally after observing Elias for some time. "But remember, this is not a game. You must act with purpose, even in practice. Every movement has meaning." Elias nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. He realized that respect was not just about being polite. It was about understanding the seriousness of a role and committing fully to it. The guards did not act recklessly, and neither could he if he wanted to learn from them. As the afternoon turned to evening, Captain Thorne called the guards together. "Today, you have all shown skill and discipline," he said, addressing the group. "But remember, your work is never done. The safety of the city and the king depends on your vigilance. Let this lesson stay with you." Elias stayed back, reflecting on the day. He had seen the consequences of carelessness and the power of skill guided by discipline. He thought about his own mistakes earlier in the morning and realized that he had been lucky. If he had acted recklessly near real danger, he could have caused harm, not just to himself but to others. As the guards departed for the evening, Elias approached Captain Thorne one last time. "Captain, thank you for showing me, for teaching me. I promise I will remember today." I want to respect your duty and learn properly. Captain Thorne nodded, his expression serious but approving. Good. Keep that promise, Elias. Respect is earned through actions, not words. You have a long way to go, but the first step is understanding the weight of responsibility. Elias watched as the captain walked away, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. He knew that he had learned an important lesson, one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Curiosity was valuable, but it had to be guided by respect. Courage was admirable, but it had to be paired with wisdom. That night, Elias returned to the inn, exhausted but thoughtful. He lay on his cot, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He thought about the thieves, the swift actions of the guards, and the careful instructions of Captain Thorne. He realized that the king's guards were not just soldiers. They were protectors, role models, and examples of discipline and responsibility. As he drifted off to sleep, Elias made a silent promise to himself. He would continue to learn, to observe, and to respect. He would practice patience, humility, and discipline, so that one day he might truly understand what it meant to honor the duty of the king's guards. Even in his dreams, he could hear the steady rhythm of marching boots, the sharp commands of Captain Thorne, and the echo of lessons learned. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he also knew that he was growing, not just as a traveler, but as someone who understood the true meaning of respect, responsibility, and dedication. And so, Elia's adventure in Eldoria continued, guided by the lessons of the day and the quiet, unwavering presence of the king's guards, a reminder that every action had consequences, and that true respect was earned through understanding and discipline. The morning sun rose over Eldoria with a gentle warmth, painting the town in shades of gold and amber. Birds chirped in the trees, and the streets buzzed softly with merchants opening their stalls and children chasing each other in playful games. But for Elias, the day held a different purpose. He had spent the previous 2 days observing, learning, and reflecting, and now he was ready to take the next step. He wanted to prove that he could do more than watch. He wanted to show that he could respect the king's guards and earn his place, even if only as a helper. Elias made his way toward the courtyard near the palace. The familiar clanging of armor and the rhythmic march of boots greeted him. The guards were already assembled, preparing for training and inspection. Captain Thorne stood at the center, watching his team with careful eyes, every movement deliberate and controlled. Elias approached cautiously, keeping a respectful distance, but his heart beat with anticipation. Captain Thorne noticed him immediately. "You are early," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Good. Being on time is the first lesson in discipline." Elias bowed slightly. "Thank you, Captain. I am ready to help today." The captain studied him for a moment. Ready to help is different from ready to learn. "You will assist today, but your main task is observation and obedience. You will do exactly as instructed without question." "Yes, Captain," Elias said firmly. He felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Today, he would begin his path toward understanding not just the skills, but the mindset of a true guard. Captain Thorne gave a nod and led Elias to a small group of younger guards. "These are your mentors for the day," he said. "Observe carefully and assist where needed. Remember, respect and discipline are the foundation of everything we do." Elias followed, watching as the young guards demonstrated drills with spears and shields, executing precise movements with controlled force. He noticed small details he had missed before. The way a guard's stance shifted slightly with each step, the subtle signals they gave one another with a tilt of the head or a flick of the wrist. Every motion had a purpose, and even the smallest mistake could disrupt the harmony of the group. When it was time for him to participate, Elias felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. His first task was simple: hold a shield and follow instructions, while the guards practiced sword techniques. But even this simple task was more challenging than he had imagined. His arms ached from the weight of the shield, and keeping his stance perfect required constant attention. Captain Thorne walked past him, observing quietly. "Focus on your purpose," the captain said. "Do not move for show, move for duty." Elias nodded, gripping the shield tightly. He concentrated on every instruction, every step, every movement. Slowly, he began to feel a rhythm, a sense of connection with the guards around him. It was not just about physical strength. It was about attention, patience, and understanding the responsibility of every action. As the morning turned into afternoon, Captain Thorne assigned Elias a slightly more challenging task. He was to assist in setting up a protective formation near the palace gates, simulating a scenario where the guards might need to prevent intruders from entering. Elias worked alongside the guards, following every instruction carefully. He felt his confidence growing, but he also felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. During the exercise, Captain Thorne observed him closely. "You are improving," he said quietly, not looking at Elias directly. "But improvement is not enough. You must internalize the meaning behind your actions. Discipline is not just in following orders, it is in understanding why you follow them." Elias absorbed the words, realizing that true respect for the guards, duty went beyond imitation or effort. It was about comprehension, about seeing the importance of every action and the consequences that could follow if it were ignored. After the exercise, Captain Thorne led Elias to the edge of the courtyard. "Today, you have done well for a beginner," he said. "But lessons are not finished. You must learn from observation, from practice, and from understanding the mindset of a guard. Will you commit to this path?" "I will, Captain," Elias said firmly. "I want to learn everything I can." Captain Thorne gave a small nod. "Then you will begin with shadowing. Follow me, observe every action, every instruction, every command. Learn not only the movements but the purpose behind them." Elias followed the captain as he walked through the city, visiting different parts of Eldoria where the guards had responsibilities. They inspected marketplaces, ensuring the streets were safe, checked the city gates, and observed interactions between the guards and townspeople. Elias noticed how carefully the guards handled each situation. They were patient, measured, and respectful, even when faced with rudeness or impatience. One particular incident caught Elias' attention. A merchant was arguing with a guard over a minor complaint, raising his voice and gesturing angrily. Elias held his breath, expecting the guard to react harshly. But instead, the guard spoke calmly, listening carefully and resolving the issue without anger or escalation. Elias realized that strength was not always about physical power. It was about control, patience, and understanding. Captain Thorne watched him closely. "Do you see now?" he asked. "Being a guard is not just about fighting. It is about serving, protecting, and maintaining order. True power comes from respect and responsibility, not force alone." "Yes, Captain," Elias said softly. "I see now. It's not enough to be strong or skilled. You must also be wise and disciplined." The rest of the day continued in a similar pattern. Elias assisted where he could, shadowed the guards, and observed carefully. He practiced movements and techniques when allowed, and each time he made a mistake, Captain Thorne or another guard corrected him with patience. Elias grew more confident, but he also grew more aware of the seriousness of his learning. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over Eldoria, Captain Thorne gathered the guards together. "Today, you have learned that discipline and respect are the foundation of our duty," he said. "And for those observing or assisting, remember that every action has meaning. You are learning not just skills but principles. Carry them with you always." Elias felt a sense of pride mixed with humility. He had come a long way from the curious, playful traveler who had arrived in Eldoria 2 days ago. He had learned the importance of patience, observation, and purpose. He had seen firsthand how the guards maintained order, protected the city, and carried out their responsibilities with unwavering dedication. Before leaving the courtyard, Captain Thorne approached Elias one last time for the day. "You have shown dedication and a willingness to learn," he said. "That is the first step toward respect. Remember, understanding is not the end, it is the beginning. There will be tests ahead, and your actions will show whether you have truly learned. Keep your mind focused and your heart humble." Elias nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "I will, Captain. I promise I will do my best." As Elias walked back to the inn, he reflected on everything he had learned. He realized that true respect was earned through effort, understanding, and consistent action. Curiosity and eagerness were valuable, but they needed guidance. Mistakes could be dangerous, and lessons were sometimes harsh but necessary. That night, as he lay on his cot, Elias could still hear the faint echo of marching boots and the sharp commands of Captain Thorne in his mind. He knew that he had begun to understand the mindset of the king's guards, but he also knew that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges, mistakes, and tests ahead, and he would need all of his focus, humility, and determination to meet them. Elias drifted into a deep sleep, dreaming of polished armor, disciplined movements, and the unwavering presence of Captain Thorne. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he also felt a sense of purpose and clarity. He was no longer just a curious traveler. He was a student, ready to learn, ready to grow, and ready to respect the duty of the king's guards. And so, Elias' adventure in Eldoria continued, guided by the lessons of observation, discipline, and mentorship. A reminder that respect is earned through understanding, effort, and consistent action, and that true growth comes from humility, patience, and dedication. The morning in Eldoria was calm, yet carried a sense of anticipation that made the air feel alive. Today was the day of a royal event, a ceremonial parade through the town that honored both the king and the kingdom. The streets were lined with citizens, eager to witness the grandeur of the occasion. Flags waved gently in the breeze, and the scent of fresh flowers and bread filled the air. But for Elias, the day was not just about watching the procession. Today, he would finally have a chance to show that he had learned the lessons of respect, discipline, and responsibility that Captain Thorne had taught him. Elias arrived early at the palace courtyard. The guards were already assembled, their polished armor gleaming in the sunlight. Captain Thorne stood at the center, overseeing the preparations. Every movement of the guards was precise, every command carried with authority. Elias took a deep breath, reminding himself of the path he had walked over the past few days, from a curious, careless traveler to a student of discipline. "Elias," Captain Thorne called, his voice firm but calm. "Today you will assist us in maintaining the safety of the procession. Your role is important. You will follow instructions carefully and act with purpose at all times. Do you understand?" "Yes, Captain," Elias replied with confidence. "I understand completely." The captain studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well. Stay close, observe, and remember everything you have learned. The king's guards are not here for games. Our duty is serious, and your actions today will reflect your understanding of that duty." Elias followed closely as the guards moved into formation. The king's carriage would pass through the main square, flanked on all sides by the guards. Elias' heart pounded with excitement and nerves. He knew that even a small mistake could have consequences, but he also knew he had trained himself to pay attention, follow instructions, and act with respect. As the king's carriage approached, the citizens fell silent. Children peeked from behind their parents' legs, and merchants paused their work to watch. The guards moved seamlessly into position, forming an unbroken line around the carriage. Elias took his place carefully, holding a small shield as instructed. He felt the weight of responsibility more than ever before, but he also felt a sense of pride. This was his chance to show that he had truly learned. Suddenly, a commotion arose near the edge of the crowd. A stray horse, startled by the noise, had broken loose and was running toward the carriage. Gasps rose from the citizens, and some people began to panic. Elias froze for a moment, remembering the lessons of observation, discipline, and purpose that Captain Thorne had taught him. The guards reacted immediately. Captain Thorne shouted commands, and the formation adjusted instantly. Guards moved quickly to guide the horse away, using their shields and careful movements to create a safe path. Elias watched closely, his mind racing to understand every step. Then, when instructed, he stepped forward carefully to assist in directing the crowd away from danger. He moved precisely as he had been taught, maintaining control and focus even under pressure. The situation was resolved within moments. The guards had prevented harm, and the crowd quickly returned to calm. The king's carriage passed safely through the square, and citizens cheered softly, relieved and impressed by the professionalism of the guards. Elias felt a surge of pride and relief. He had faced a real test, and he had acted with discipline and respect, just as he had been taught. After the carriage passed, Captain Thorne approached Elias. "You handled yourself well," he said, his voice carrying quiet approval. "You observed, you acted with purpose, and you respected the process. That is the first step toward true understanding." Elias felt a mixture of pride and humility. He realized that respect was not about showing off or trying to impress others. It was about awareness, focus, and understanding the importance of every action. He nodded. "Thank you, Captain. I did my best to remember everything you taught me." The captain studied him closely. "Your best is not just in physical action. It is in your attitude, your attention, and your willingness to learn. Today, you have shown all of these. But remember, this is only the beginning. Respect and discipline are lifelong lessons." Elias followed the guards back to the courtyard after the event. He observed as they returned to their routines, practicing formations, checking equipment, and maintaining order. He noticed how each guard supported the other, how every movement was purposeful and measured. He realized that the lessons he had learned today applied not just to the parade, but to life itself. Discipline, respect, patience, and observation were skills that could guide him in any situation. Captain Thorne called him aside once the day's activities were complete. "Elias," he said, "you have learned well, but learning is not the end. True understanding comes when you apply what you have learned without hesitation, with humility, and with respect for those around you. Today, you applied your lessons. That is commendable." Elias felt a sense of satisfaction and gratitude. He had come a long way from the young traveler who had arrived carelessly in Eldoria. Over the past days, he had faced mistakes, observed consequences, practiced patience, and learned to follow instructions with care. Now he had seen the value of discipline in action, and he had contributed in a meaningful way. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the city, Elias stood quietly near the courtyard gates. He watched the guards march in formation, their boots striking the stone with steady rhythm, their movements precise and unwavering. He felt a deep respect for them, not just for their strength or skill, but for their dedication, discipline, and commitment to duty. Captain Thorne approached him one last time. "Elias," he said, "you have shown respect, discipline, and the willingness to learn. These are qualities that will serve you well in life. Remember, the king's guards are not here for games, and neither is the responsibility you carry when you choose to respect and follow them. Guard these lessons carefully. They are more valuable than you realize." Elias bowed deeply. "I understand, Captain. I will never forget what I have learned here. Thank you for guiding me." The captain gave a slight nod, a rare smile flickering across his face. "Well done, Elias, well done." As Elias walked back through the streets of Eldoria that evening, he felt a sense of accomplishment and growth. He had learned that curiosity and eagerness were powerful tools, but they must be guided by respect and discipline. He had faced a real test, observed consequences, and acted with purpose under pressure. He understood now that true respect was earned, not given, and that dedication and humility were the keys to earning it. Elias paused for a moment, looking back toward the palace. The guards were still patrolling, maintaining order with quiet authority. He smiled, feeling a sense of connection to their duty, even as a humble observer. He knew that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever, guiding his actions, shaping his character, and reminding him that some roles in life carried weight, responsibility, and honor. That night, as he rested in the inn, Elias reflected on his journey. From a curious traveler to a respectful student, he had experienced fear, humility, learning, and growth. He had understood the value of discipline, the importance of observation, and the meaning of respect. And he had seen firsthand that the king's guards were not there for games. They were the shield of the kingdom, and their duty was sacred. Elias fell asleep with a calm sense of purpose. In his dreams, he marched alongside the guards, followed Captain Thorne's instructions, and maintained order with precision and care. He knew that his journey was far from over, but he also knew that he had taken the first steps toward becoming someone who understood the true meaning of responsibility, respect, and dedication. And so, the story of Elias' time in Eldoria came full circle. He had arrived as a curious, somewhat careless traveler, unaware of the seriousness of the king's guards. He had faced mistakes, observed consequences, and learned from mentors. He had practiced discipline, shown respect, and proven himself capable of understanding the weight of responsibility. Through patience, observation, and guidance, Elias had grown, not just in skill but in character. He had learned that respect was earned through actions, that discipline was the foundation of strength, and that true courage was measured by wisdom, humility, and careful consideration. The guards continued their duties, steadfast and unwavering, a living reminder of the lessons Elias had learned. And as he walked through the streets of Eldoria, Elias carried with him the knowledge, discipline, and respect that would guide him for the rest of his life. A young traveler forever changed by the king's guards, and forever mindful that some roles are not for games, but for honor, duty, and respect.